welcome back. Well, it's time to do some AFEX commodities market updates now. And the week that ended September the 20th saw a 95% drop in the total value traded week on week. As usual, we have Michael Martins joining us from our Abuja studio, the portfolio manager at AFEX, to tell us the details. Hello, Michael. Good morning.
Hi, Chimezie. Good morning. It's always
a
pleasure to be
here. Michael, it's Ini.
Oh, forgive me. Forgive me. I am so sorry about
that. Okay. I would have loved to say, I'm going to take it.
So just moving on to just giving a summary of what happened in the commodities market in the week under consideration. The total value of transactions traded on the exchange fell by 95% from 3.67 billion to close to trading week at 184 million. The total number of contracts traded on the exchange also fell by 96% from 184,738 contracts to close to trading week at 6,600 contracts. The total number of deals, however, went up by 94% from 18 deals to close to trading week at 35 deals. And the AFEX Commodities Index and the AFEX Export Index, which is the AEI, remained unchanged at 427.34 and 168.08 respectively. With regards to the volume of contracts traded on the exchange, there was a general decrease, with the major corporate being Maize, which fell from 184,404 contracts to close to trading week at 659 contracts. With regards to other changes, we saw a slight increase in the number of contracts traded for soybean, which went up from 299 contracts to close to trading week at 2,874 contracts. Rice also went up slightly in terms of volume, which went up from 2 contracts traded last week to close to trading week at 3,044 contracts. With regards to the price changes on the exchange, we generally saw changes in the price of maize, soybean, and paddy rice, of which maize went up by 3.46%, gaining 764 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 22,862 naira per contract. The price of soybean also went up by 10.96%, gaining 3,731 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 37,783 naira per contract. And last but certainly not least, we have paddy rice, which went up by 0.82%, gaining 176 naira in the contract value to close the trading week at 21,494 naira per contract. And as we always say, if you want to know more about the commodities market, you can always go to our website, which is www.afexnigeria.com. And if you want to get started trading commodities, you can download our app, which is available on iOS and Android. And I am sorry, Ini, again, for mixing your name.
Thanks for that update. Now let's look at our next conversation. The theme for this year's UN Food System Summit is targeted at resuscitating the world's disrupted food system, after the COVID-19 pandemic. The summit will serve as an opportunity to empower all people to cross the food agriculture value chain to leverage the power of food systems to drive our, recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic and get the world back on track to achieve all 17 sustainable development goals by 2030. So my question now is, the UN identified partnership across the value chain and other sectors as the way, forward, coming from the pandemic disrupted year. What are the industry problems in, developing collaboration among stakeholders, both in the value chain and across other sectors?
So thank you very much, Ladi, for that question. So I think there are a variety of factors that are affecting collaboration across the different players in the agriculture ecosystem. But the major ones would ideally be 3. The first of which is trust, right? So first off, there is a need to facilitate trust across the different collaborators, the agricultural value chain. It is sometimes the case that, when funds are dispersed, those funds are not necessarily used for what they're meant for. So there is a need to align trust across the different collaborators, in the agricultural value chain. So that's first. The second would also be to align short and long-term interests, right? So if you look at the nature of private and public capital, they have 2 different natures. So if you look at private capital, it's very often short-term and it's very often impatient, right? And with private capital, there is always that the sentiment of the time value of money and also the opportunity cost of inaction. By the very opposite, public funds or public capital doesn't necessarily have that same dynamics. So it is necessary to align both long and short short-term interest so that we can essentially facilitate more partnerships in the agricultural value chain. Third would also be the weak institutional frameworks that currently exist in terms of arbitration and then also disputes, right? So it is the case that when such disputes come up, some of the institutional frameworks that we have are not necessarily the best in terms of arbitrating those disputes. So if we are able to solve those problems, the problems of trust within the collaborators in the system, aligning long and short-term interests, and then also setting up extremely strong, institutional frameworks, I think we can begin to talk about building more sustainable and even stronger partnerships across the different players in the agricultural value chain.
Well, great, Michael, for identifying the problem. I mean, they say that identifying the problem is a major part, but we also have to see, are there possible ways? These are, like very broad. When you talk about trust, how do you win back trust? You talk about aligning short and long-term interests, because naturally, in the private sector, they just want to make their money, get profit, and move on. And it's different. The focus is different. Yeah, it's different for the public sector. So how do we solve this problem? How do we at least reduce the space in between and bring them closer so that we can have a sustainable global food system?
Thank you very much, Inni. So I think some of those policies and framework already exist, right? In terms of even the Sustainable Development Goals itself, right? And what they do is that, or what it does rather, is that it helps us align interests and actions, right? So towards the same goals. Right, but it is the case that the Sustainable Development Goals are a bit hard to measure, particularly for companies that do not necessarily have, the skills, the talents, and the resources to get the work done. AFEX has done some work, in that space in recent years, with regards to our impact report. But that's because we had the necessary resources to drive action, within that space. It is also the case. So in terms of moving forward, right, there is a need to create a more simplified framework for attracting international capital and also philanthropic dollars into the space, right? So it's particularly for businesses that are into climate financing, green financing, and also other types of sustainable businesses. But I think it's also the case that some of these businesses already exist. But they're finding it a bit more difficult to access the financing that they need, in order to grow their businesses. Apart from that, too, right? If you look at the general business climate, it isn't particularly encouraging in terms of attracting, the international funds that are actually necessary. In terms of ease of doing business in Nigeria alone, I mean, it is a stark situation as of today. So I think if we can address some of those issues with regards to simplifying the framework to attract international dollars, and then also small and medium scale businesses improving their talent and their resources so that they can necessarily do work within that space, I think we can make a whole lot more progress. And I think there's also a need to, for private and public partnerships in terms of driving policies that would essentially create a sustainable, in creating a sustainable food system for the country.
All right, Michael, could you identify, policies that can assist in, achieving mutually beneficial and profitable partnership across, the value chain and across other sectors?
So in terms of policies, right? Like I said, right, the most important thing is what already has been done before, and I think in recent months, right, we have seen a bit more work from the central bank in terms of the strategic maize reserve, which is essentially to help build the ecosystem in the commodities trading space. And I think a whole lot more of that needs to be done, in the coming years if we're going to build a sustainable ecosystem whereby the participants in the agricultural value chain can begin to then grow, and then we can begin to start looking at our country in terms of being food secure. So that's just one example, but I think a whole lot more needs to be done. And I think that what's most important about those partnerships and those policies in general would be that they have to be in concert, right, between the public sector and then also the private sector, right? So it's on one hand, the job of the public sector to devise some of these policies, into play, and then you notice that in terms of implementation, private players tend to do a whole lot more work in comparison to the private sector. So working hand in hand is what I think is essentially necessary in order for us to move forward in terms of both the policies that need to be created and then also the implementation of those policies.
And what sustainable practices can the industry adopt to benefit people and the environment while also combating the issue of climate change and increasing resilience to environmental and economic shocks?
So thank you very much for that question. And to even answer that, right, as it is the case today, the continent is growing at around 3%, right? And what that means is that we need to grow our food production at about 5% just to keep up, right? But even when that is done, there is a bit of a 10% deficit, which is still in place that needs to be addressed, right? So in terms of some of the policies that can be put into place, I think it is the case that some research has already been done in terms of improved seeds, in terms of cowpea, soybean, and then sorghum, which have a tendency to grow in semi-arid regions, right? What that would essentially help is that it would help reduce the encroachment of desertification, right, into arable lands, right? Because the problem when you have more, population than there is food available is that there is the tendency for us to increase the amount of farmland that we are cultivating in any given period of time, which would essentially reduce the amount of forestry that we have, which is a sustainability problem. But in terms of climate change and its impact on agriculture and even the broader Nigeria, even the broader commodities market, I think it is the case that a lot more work and research still needs to be done, and also a lot more funding needs to be done. A lot more funding needs to be put into the sector if we're looking to grow and measure the impact of climate change on agriculture and even on agricultural activities.
Yeah, when we talk about climate change and agriculture, it's a very long conversation that I think we still have a whole lot of grounds to cover, especially here in Nigeria. I don't know if we've really started. Well, thank you so much, Michael, for bringing us up to date with activities in the AFEX commodities market and as well sharing your thoughts on the global food system. Enjoy the rest of your day, Michael Martins.
You're very welcome, Ini.
So we'll just take a moment now. When we come back, we'll head to the market. Stay with us.